Your pelvis shut down the day someone crossed your sacred boundary. This closure didn't happen yesterday or last week. It happened much earlier in your life, at a time when you were far too young to name what was happening. The only possible response back then was to tighten the base, harden the sacrum, and raise an internal defense that was never taken down again. Since that day, something deep in your body has stayed on constant alert, shaping the way you experience intimacy, how you respond in moments of vulnerability, and how you react whenever a situation asks for your full presence. This pattern isn't weakness, nor is it a common tension that disappears with stretching or a massage. It is a somatic defense embedded in your tissue, installed at a time when your nervous system hadn't yet learned to create conscious boundaries, and had to protect your center in the only way it knew how. What you now feel as persistent stiffness at the base, difficulty relaxing fully, or sudden withdrawal in moments of surrender is the echo of that original contraction, one your body has preserved for decades, still waiting for a signal that it's safe now. Today, you're going to learn how to identify the exact spot where that defense took hold. Apply a subtle gesture that shifts the sacrum from its locked position, and use a specific breathing pattern that helps your nervous system update its danger reading. If you leave this video now, you'll miss the moment when that contraction begins to release, and your base regains the ability to support the present without reacting to the past. What shaped your pelvis on that day is about to be revealed. This closure of the pelvis acts like a defensive file installed in the body. There is a specific somatic pattern where the base contracted in a split second and never fully released, creating a protective imprint that remained active for decades after the event that triggered it. The sacrum lost its natural curve, the sacroiliac joints locked into a posterior position, and the pelvic diaphragm hardened into a kind of board, blocking any movement of opening or surrender. Hermetic traditions recognized the pelvis as the first seal of the inner temple, the sacred territory where vital energy anchors before ascending through the spine. When that territory is crossed before a person is mature enough to establish conscious boundaries, the seal turns into a lock. What was meant to be a living foundation, capable of holding presence and movement, becomes an immovable fortress, still defending something that no longer needs to be protected. Polyvagal theory explains what happens at the moment of this locking. When a threat is perceived as inescapable during a phase of immature neurological development, the nervous system triggers the dorsal vagal state, shutting down the body's center as a last survival strategy. This paralysis doesn't just disappear because the event is over. It gets stored as a neural imprint, embedded in the deep musculature of the pelvic floor, in the fascia that wraps around the sacrum, and in the body's very sense of what safety feels like. Recent neuroimaging studies show that intense experiences during early ages can permanently alter the connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the brain's limbic structures. This change drastically reduces the nervous system's ability to distinguish a past threat from present reality. The body keeps operating as if danger never ended, holding the base in a permanent defensive state, even when there's no real threat in the external world. This rigidity at the base is not just an uncomfortable physical sensation. It shapes the decisions you postpone, the relationships you cut short before they deepen, the opportunities you turn down because something deep in your body triggers an automatic retreat. That contraction from long ago still governs how you relate to intimacy, how you hold commitments, and how you respond to any invitation that asks for vulnerable presence. There is someone who lived exactly like this for more than 3 decades, and her story will shed light on how this pattern operates until the moment the inner territory is finally reclaimed. Barbara was 50 years old and had been managing a department store for over a decade. Her routine required constant presence, quick decision-making, and difficult conversations, all of which she handled with apparent competence. But there was something no one around her could ever see, since a very young age. At a time when she still didn't know how to set boundaries or name what was happening, her base had completely shut down. What began as an automatic protective response when someone crossed her sacred boundary turned into a permanent defense that came to govern her entire life. The rigidity was visceral and inescapable. Barbara couldn't relax her pelvis, not even when she was alone, not even when she felt safe. Her sacrum remained contracted, as if her body was still defending against something that happened decades ago, when she was far too young to process or interrupt what was being done to her. Her breath couldn't reach her base. Her lower back stayed in a state of chronic tension, and any situation that asked for surrender or vulnerability triggered an automatic pullback deep within her body. It was as if her pelvis had frozen on that day and never regained the ability to release. She had tried conventional therapy, physical therapy for her lower back, meditation, yoga, and even deep bodywork treatments. Nothing worked because none of those approaches reached the defensive file installed in her sacrum when she was just a few years old. The tension always came back because her body was still protecting the territory that had been invaded back then, when she had no way to defend herself. The closure of her base was not just a physical symptom, it was the somatic imprint of something that had never been processed or released. It was during a workshop on somatic trauma and pelvic release that Barbara first heard how experiences of violation in youth can create permanent defensive contractions at the body's center. The therapist explained that when a sacred boundary is crossed before neurological maturity, the nervous system stores the impact directly in the pelvic muscles, locking the sacrum as the only way to prevent anything from ever reaching that depth again. Barbara felt her whole body recognize the description, as if someone had finally named what she had been carrying, locked away in her base for more than 40 years. The first time she applied the subtle gesture for sacral realignment, a delicate micro-tilt taught by the therapist, Barbara noticed something she hadn't felt since before that day. The base of her pelvis began to soften. It wasn't full relief or instant release, but it was a clear and unmistakable sense that the defensive file was starting to unwind, as if her body had finally received permission to let go of what it had held onto for decades. What Barbara discovered in that moment is exactly what you are about to experience in your own body right now. The first step is to locate the exact point where the closure resides. This isn't about mentally analyzing or trying to remember when it all began. It's about refined tactile awareness, allowing the body to reveal where the defense took hold. Sit on a chair or on the floor with your back supported. Place both hands at the base of your sacrum, just above the tailbone, and begin to notice the difference between simply sitting on your pelvis, disconnected from it, and truly being seated in it, present in the territory that has been closed off for so long. Bring your full attention to where your body's weight is centered. Notice if there is a specific area that feels harder than the rest, a spot that seems more like a block than living bone, or a zone that simply doesn't respond when you try to sense what's there. That lack of response is not an absence of sensation, it is the presence of the defense. It is the defensive file still active, keeping that territory off limits because that's where the invasion happened, and your body decided never to allow full access to that depth again. You may notice a lack of temperature in that region, as if the sacrum is colder than the rest of your spine. You might feel that your breath doesn't reach that area, that your internal movement simply doesn't extend that far, or you may sense a subtle resistance, as if there's an invisible layer preventing your attention from fully entering. Any of these signs means you've found the point where the old contraction remains. Don't force anything. Simply acknowledge that you're facing the territory that was locked away when you were too young to stop what was happening. The second step is to reorganize the sacrum without triggering the defense mechanism that has kept this region locked for decades. The movement is a micro-tilt, so subtle it's barely visible from the outside, yet powerful enough to shift the bone from its frozen position. Keep your hands at the base of your sacrum and very gently tilt your pelvis backward, as if you were slightly rounding your lower back. Then return to a neutral position. The movement should be microscopic, just enough to feel the sacrum gliding ever so slightly within the pelvis. Do not force range. If your base is extremely contracted, the movement may be almost imperceptible at first, just an intention to tilt that your body can barely execute. That is completely normal. The deep muscles of the pelvic floor have been in chronic spasm for decades. They need a gentle invitation, not more invasion. Repeat the gesture 5 or 6 times, always with the same lightness, allowing the sacroiliac joints to begin adjusting without triggering the protective reflex that locks everything up again when it senses threat. If you're already noticing some mobility in your base, you can gently explore a bit more of the sacral glide, allowing the bone to move with slightly more range inside the pelvis. But if the contraction still feels intense, keep the movement minimal. What truly matters isn't how much you move, but the quality of attention you bring to that territory as you perform the gesture. It's this presence, combined with precise movement, that begins to signal to the nervous system that the defensive file can start to unravel, because the body now has choice, where before there was only automatic reaction. Before moving on to the third step, you need to know what happened to Barbara in the first few weeks after she applied the exact same 2 steps you've just practiced. In her early sessions, applying the location of the defensive point and the micro-tilt of the sacrum, Barbara noticed something she hadn't felt since before that day in her youth. For the first time in over 40 years, she was able to sit on a chair without her lower back reflexively tightening. Her breath began to reach the base, flowing into an area that had remained blocked ever since her sacred boundary was crossed. Warmth returned to the sacrum, and the chronic sense that the base of her body was a cold stone began to fade, revealing there was living tissue underneath the defense she had carried for decades. The changes weren't only physical. Barbara was able to hold a difficult conversation with an employee without that automatic pullback in her center that used to make her avoid confrontation. She accepted an invitation to a relationship that, just months earlier, she would have turned down with the excuse of not being ready, when in truth, it was her body that was rejecting any situation involving vulnerability. She realized that moments of intimacy no longer triggered the reflexive closing of the pelvis, as if her nervous system had finally started to distinguish the present from the past. Her base was no longer acting as a permanent defense. It was beginning to function as true support. What Barbara felt in those first sessions is exactly what is beginning to emerge in your body right now. Locating the defensive point and reorganizing the sacrum initiated the update. But one more step is needed to consolidate this transformation and send a clear message to the nervous system. The inner territory has been reclaimed, and the danger that once required closure is no longer here. The third step is guided breathing, a pattern that updates the nervous system's reading of safety. Up to this point, you have located the defense and reorganized the geometry of your sacrum, but your body may still be operating under the old imprint of threat. Directed breathing acts as the final signal, informing your deep neural structures that the defensive file can now be shut down because the present moment is not repeating what happened decades ago. Keep one hand at the base of your sacrum and begin to breathe in a way where your exhale is longer than your inhale. Inhale naturally through your nose without forcing, and then exhale slowly through your mouth, bringing your full awareness to the pelvic region. Feel the breath traveling down your spine, passing through the diaphragm, and reaching all the way to the base, into the territory that the old contraction used to block. The prolonged exhalation activates the vagus nerve and signals to the autonomic nervous system that there is no immediate danger, that it is safe to shut down the perpetual alert mode. Repeat this breath 10 times, always keeping your hand on your sacrum, and notice how the region begins to respond differently with each breath cycle. These 3 steps form a complete code of reopening. The first one helped you locate where the defense had settled, allowing you to recognize the exact point that locked up when your sacred boundary was crossed. The second reorganized the geometry of the sacrum, shifting the bone out of its frozen position and allowing the deep musculature to begin releasing layers of tension preserved over decades. The third updated your nervous system's reading of safety, letting your body know that the inner territory has been reclaimed and your pelvis no longer needs to respond to the past as if it's still happening. The central ritual is now complete. What you've just practiced is the same process that allowed Barbara to reclaim her base after more than 40 years of operating in perpetual defense. Now comes the moment to seal this experience into your body so the transformation can fully take root. And so you have a portable tool you can use anytime you feel the old contraction starting to return. The physical markers that confirm this reorganization are tangible and verifiable. Your breath now reaches the base without obstruction, flowing into a territory that had been blocked for decades. Warmth has returned to the sacrum, replacing the cold stone sensation you used to carry in that area. You can sit without your lower back tightening reflexively, and the base of your body is finally available for rest, instead of staying in a constant state of alert. These are not abstract sensations, they are concrete signs that the defensive file has begun to dissolve, and that your pelvis is starting to recognize the present instead of reacting to the past. To anchor this new state, use a simple and discreet signal gesture, something you can repeat in any situation. Place one hand at the base of your sacrum with gentle pressure and take a long, directed exhale into that region. Maintain that contact for 30 to 60 seconds, feeling how the warmth of your hand and the quality of your breath help consolidate the reorganization that just took place. This gesture acts as a somatic seal, one your body recognizes as confirmation that the inner territory has been reclaimed. When you feel the base beginning to contract again in the coming days, stiffness returning to the sacrum, shortened breath, or a sudden pullback in response to a situation that asks for openness or vulnerability, place your hand on the base of your sacrum. Perform a delicate micro-tilt and take 3 breaths, directing the exhale into that territory. As you do this, remind yourself internally that your body can now hold presence without defending, that your pelvis no longer needs to close the way it once did, back when you were too young to stop what was happening. This sequence transforms what you've learned today into a portable tool, one that helps reorganize your base whenever the old defense tries to return. The seal is complete. The reorganization of your inner territory that you've just carried out is not just temporary relief. It's a somatic code update that allows for an entirely new way of inhabiting your base. What was locked on that day has started to unravel, and the days ahead will reveal how this shift unfolds in your ability to stay present, to hold relationships, and to commit in ways that previously would have triggered automatic closure. You now carry in your body the experience of a base that does not react to the past, but recognizes the present. This isn't just a change in physical posture or temporary relief from tension. It is a somatic code update that changes how you relate, how you hold difficult decisions, and how you respond to commitments that used to trigger retreat. The pelvis that once closed to protect itself has begun to recover the ability to hold presence without contraction, to inhabit vulnerability without setting off the alarm that stayed active for entire decades. The ritual you practice today is one of the gateways to deep somatic reorganization, but it's not the only one. There are other regions in the body where old defenses have also settled, waiting for the same kind of update points in the throat where expression was blocked. Tensions in the diaphragm that restricted breathing, contractions in the solar plexus that reduced your ability to feel. Each of these files preserved a form of protection that made sense in the past and now needs to be released, so the whole body can recover its full range, warmth, and the ability to inhabit the present without carrying the weight of threats that no longer exist. Peter Levine, the creator of somatic experiencing, understood something fundamental about how the body holds on to what the mind has forgotten. He showed that somatic release is not an abstract idea or purely psychological process. It is a concrete update of files embedded in the tissue. What you did today wasn't about talking through trauma. It was about dismantling the neural imprint it left in the deep musculature of your base, allowing your nervous system to finally receive the message of safety that never arrived back when you were too young to protect yourself. Ancient traditions understood the body as a temple, not as poetic metaphor, but because they recognized that reorganizing the inner territory is about restoring a sacred foundation where presence can finally live. When the pelvis stops operating like a fortress and returns to functioning as a living base, what's reorganized is not just a set of muscles and bones. It's the very ground on which consciousness, creativity, and the capacity to surrender are built. What was crossed on that day is being restored to its original function, and that opens up possibilities that were blocked for so long. You may have forgotten they ever existed. If this video resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Share it with someone you know whose sacred boundary was crossed, someone who still feels their pelvis locked. Consider becoming a member of the channel to support the creation of more content with this level of depth. Leave a comment that says, "The old contraction has released, and my pelvis now only recognizes the present." That anchors the ritual in your body and creates a testimony of transformation for others who are still carrying that contraction. To continue your journey of somatic reorganization, click the video now appearing on your screen and watch another powerful and transformative episode from this channel. The base that once shut down to protect you on the day someone crossed your sacred boundary is now beginning to recognize that you no longer have to live trapped by something that has already passed. Your body finally has permission to release what it held for decades, and your pelvis can stop being a file of defense and become the territory where you finally live whole.